AITA for refusing to give my half-sister any of our grandmother's jewelry after they excluded me for years? For context, I, 24F, am the product of an affair. My father was married when I was born, and his marriage fell apart because of it. My dad eventually divorced his now ex-wife, and his 3 kids, my half-siblings 32F, 30M, 28M, have always resented me for it. I understand, what happened between our parents was messy and destroyed their happy family, but I was just a baby, and they've punished me for it my whole life. Growing up, they excluded me from everything. They didn't want me around, made cruel comments when I was, and acted like I didn't exist unless they were making me feel unwelcome. The worst part was when my mom passed away when I was 19. While I was mourning my mother's death, they openly celebrated. I found out they made jokes about how the trash took itself out and threw a party less than a month after the funeral to celebrate it. That broke me, and I've been no contact with them for years over it. Our shared grandmother wasn't much better. She wasn't outright cruel to me, but she clearly favored my half-siblings. They spent vacations and summers with her, while she barely acknowledged me. She also made it known on more than one occasion that she wanted her jewelry to go to my oldest half-sister, 32F, when she passed away as the oldest female grandchild in the family since she never had any daughters of her own. It was well established to everyone that knew her that this was her intention. However, she didn't leave a notarized will, so legally, her estate went to my dad as her only child. To my shock, my dad gave the entire jewelry collection to me. He said he regretted how I'd been treated by the family and wanted me to have something meaningful. It was the first time he had ever done something to truly acknowledge me, and I was floored. Now, my half-siblings are furious, especially my oldest half-sister. She's demanding I give her some of the jewelry, claiming that since she was closer to our grandmother and she had always intended for her sister to have it, it's unfair that I kept it all. She even said I wasn't really part of the family and has been calling me selfish and accusing me of stealing what was rightfully hers. I refused. I told her that after years of being treated like garbage, I'm not giving up the one thing my dad has ever done to acknowledge me. She accused me of being bitter and petty, saying I'm using this to punish them for things that happened years ago. I'll admit, part of me feels like I'm finally getting some compensation for their horrible treatment of me. But the other part of me wonders if I'm being petty or cruel by keeping it all when the others were so much closer to her. So AITA? Edited to add due to some people making assumptions about my mother. She did not know my father was married originally. They married after my father's divorce because at the time my mother could not support the 2 of us by herself and being an unmarried pregnant woman was a major cultural taboo for her. My father spent a majority of his time home, when he actually bothered to come at all, trying to make it up to his children, my half-siblings, when it was his time in custody. As far as I am aware, my mother never treated them poorly. They tended to ignore her and she did the same when they were around our house. Comments. Your dad caused all this grief by cheating, it's sad all around. EFF your dad. Update 4 days later. First, I want to thank everyone for the responses, advice, and support. I never expected this post to gain so much attention, and it's been overwhelming but also incredibly validating to know that so many of you understand where I'm coming from. After reading through the comments and reflecting on everything, I decided to stand firm in my decision to keep the jewelry. This is the first meaningful gesture my dad has ever made towards me, and I'm not going to give it up, especially to people who have done nothing but make me feel like an outsider my entire life. For greater clarification, the jewelry also represents a greater apology to me. No one had ever apologized for the treatment I faced throughout my entire childhood, even when I chose to cut them off. Not for the constant name-calling, not for the actual slurs they would regularly call me, not for the unwanted comments of my weight and how I was a pig, just like my mother, none of it. Before, this is the only apology I've ever received even tangentially relating to my childhood, and yes, I am very aware of how bitter I sound here. That said, I didn't want to completely close the door on reconciliation, so I reached out to my dad to discuss everything. I asked him why he gave the jewelry to me and what he thought about the backlash from my half-siblings. He admitted that he regrets how he handled things during my childhood and feels that he prioritized his other kids at my expense. Giving me the jewelry was his way of trying to make amends even if it's late. I also told him about how my half-siblings were treating me now and the things they had said about my mom in the past. He was upset and said he would speak to them about their current behavior, though that wasn't my intention and I doubt it will make much of a difference. As for my half-siblings, the situation has only escalated. My oldest half-sister, 32F, sent a long message accusing me of being vindictive and selfish, still claiming that I'm taking the jewelry out of spite, which I suppose is partially true. She tried to guilt-trip me again by bringing up how close she was to our grandmother and how much she wanted these specific pieces to remember her by. I didn't respond, but I've saved the messages in case things get worse. Unexpectedly, my middle half-brother, 30M, reached out privately. He admitted he was wrong for how he treated me in the past and apologized. He said he doesn't care about the jewelry and just wants to move forward. I told him I appreciated his apology, but I need time to process everything before I can even consider having a relationship with him. I'm still no contact with my oldest half-sister and youngest half-brother. At this point, I don't see that changing. To those wondering about the jewelry itself, I've decided to have some of the pieces appraised and restored. I plan to wear a few of them on special occasions and keep the rest stored safely. They hold sentimental value to me now, not because of my grandmother, but because they represent a step toward my dad finally seeing me as part of the family, even if it's imperfect and overdue. That said, after speaking with my middle half-brother, I've come to understand most of my half-sister's anger and attacks come from a place of grief. As such, I plan to give her my grandmother's favorite pair of earrings. She wore them constantly, and while I doubt my sister will have any gratitude towards me, I'm sure she'll appreciate the gesture nonetheless. Thanks again for all the support. This whole situation has been messy, but I feel more confident in my decision now. If anything else significant happens, I'll update again. ETA, the comments have made me realize that I've probably been giving my sister too much benefit of the doubt. While I do want to return the earrings to her, I think I'll offer to let her buy them back instead. Though for the people concerned that letting her take them may incite her to sue me for the rest, I'll see how soon I can speak to a lawyer for a consultation.